Jacob Murray's eyes went wide in horror as he stared at the radar of his fighter jet. Blaring red dots surged across the screen as his worst nightmare came true. A massive fleet of aggressive alien ships were speeding straight for Earth. "Command, this is Pilot Murray initiating an emergency protocol," Jacob said over the communications link. The seasoned Earth Defense Force pilot had been doing routine training maneuvers in orbit when the anomaly appeared. "Unknown hostiles on approach. Get ready to scramble the full fleet immediately." EDF command crackled back over the comms. "What? Say again, Pilot Murray. Did you say hostile ships?" "Affirmative, command. We've got a full-scale invasion force inbound. This is not a drill. It's really happening." Jacob's hands shook on the flight controls as he watched the enemy armada amass around the planet, surrounding them from every angle. Within minutes, every video screen, TV feed, and comms device on Earth lit up with an intercepted alien transmission. A scaly creature with reptilian eyes stared out at them, its voice grating and harsh. "People of Earth, I am Jackson, Supreme Commander of the Iconian Empire. We have secretly monitored your species for decades. Your rapid technological advancement and expansion into our space has been deemed a threat. As of now, your planet is under Iconian control. Surrender immediately or face annihilation." Panic erupted worldwide as people realized this was real. Martial law was declared as riots broke out. World leaders convened an emergency summit, knowing they were hopelessly outmatched. Earth's defenses were like sticks against the Iconians' advanced weaponry. They needed a plan fast or billions would die. Famous for his brilliant tactics and creative thinking, Jacob Murray was called into the strategy session. He studied the initial scans of Iconian tech, sweat beading his forehead. Standard warfare would get them obliterated. Their only hope was to outwit the enemy. "I have a proposal. It's a long shot, but it may be our only chance," Jacob announced to the room of terrified generals and presidents. "We can't beat them ship to ship, but we could use hacking, disinformation, and precision strikes to exploit their weaknesses, turn their own tech against them." Jacob laid out his daring plan, hands gesturing animatedly. It was bold and incredibly risky. Some commanders balked, preferring direct confrontation. But in the end, they had no other choice. Jacob was put in charge of a black ops task force to carry it out. Every hacker, pilot, and soldier with the skills to pull it off. The fate of the human race now rested on this desperate gambit and the guts of one seasoned pilot. As the Iconian lasers began raining down on Earth's cities and the horrific ground assault started, Jacob and his team flew out to meet them, determined to hit the invaders with everything they had. The greatest threat humanity ever faced loomed before them. The battle to save Earth was on. News of the looming threat of the Iconian Annihilator weapon hit Jacob Murray and his team like a gut punch. They huddled around the intel report, reading the chilling details. "This thing could wipe out entire continents," muttered Jack Reeves, Jacob's second in command. "Jackson's really pulling out all the stops." Jacob's teeth clenched. "Not if we have anything to say about it. We're going to take that weapon out before it ever reaches Earth." They pored over the schematics of the Icarax, the formidable Iconian flagship transporting the Annihilator. The vessel bristled with advanced defenses and elite warriors. Infiltrating it would be their most dangerous mission yet. "I won't lie, this is going to be a hell of a fight," Jacob said. "But we've got surprise on our side. Thanks to that Iconian stealth tech we swiped. We get in quick, disable the Annihilator, and get the fuck out." Assembling his top fighters, hackers, and infiltration experts, Jacob laid out the audacious plan. They drilled for hours, practicing every step until they could do it in their sleep. When the time came, they boarded a stealth dropship and slipped through the Icarax's sensor net, attaching to its hull like a tick. Cutting through with laser torches, Jacob and his team dropped into the belly of the beast. Alarms blared as they sprinted through the corridors, gunning down Iconian soldiers left and right. Plasma bolts crisscrossed around them as they returned fire, pushing towards the center of the ship. Rerouting controls to bypass the security locks, yelled Zhang, their lead hacker, as she tapped furiously at a console. Sweat poured down her face. The doors hissed open and they surged into the weapons control room, only to be met by a hail of plasma fire. Two of Jacob's men went down instantly as elite Iconian warriors poured in from all sides. "Take cover!" Jacob bellowed, diving behind a console as the room exploded into chaos. He popped up, firing controlled bursts that dropped Iconians with each pull of the trigger. But there were too many. They just kept coming. "Flank the bastards," he ordered, lobbing a frag grenade. The explosion bought them precious seconds. Gritting his teeth, Jacob charged forward, a pistol in each hand, blasting away as he advanced. His team followed suit, yelling war cries as they engaged in brutal close-quarters combat. It was a bloody, desperate slugfest, but finally, they cleared the room. Panting, Jacob ran to the Annihilator's console, slamming in the override codes. Warnings flashed red across the screens. "Initiating self-destruct," he barked into the comms. "Everyone back to the ship now." Plasma bolts nipped at their heels as they sprinted back through the Iconian flagship, their fallen comrades heavy in their hearts. They leapt into the waiting stealth ship and rocketed away, the Icarax exploding behind them in a blinding flash. On Earth, when news of the Annihilator's destruction spread, ragged cheers erupted from the weary defenders. For the first time, a flicker of hope spread through the ranks. The Iconian juggernaut wasn't invincible after all. But Jacob and his team had little time to celebrate. Jackson's enraged scream had echoed across the comms as they'd escaped. The Iconian commander would be out for blood now. As they licked their wounds and mourned their dead, Earth's brightest minds worked feverishly to crack Iconian technology. And amazingly, they began to make headway, jury-rigging new capabilities for Earth ships. When the upgraded Vanguard fleet was rolled out, Jacob almost wept at the sleek, deadly lines of the hybrid ships. Now they could take the fight back to the Iconians. "All right, listen up," he told his troops, now seasoned veterans of the impossible. "Their supply lines, their reinforcements, that's how we bleed them. We hit those hard and don't let up." A sea of determined faces stared back at him, ready to follow Jacob Murray into the jaws of hell itself. As the Vanguard fleet tore across the stars, unleashing daring raids into the heart of Iconian space, a new fire burned in the hearts of Earth's defenders. The Iconians were learning the depths of human defiance, and they were starting to realize that they may have kicked a hornet's nest. Jacob Murray stood on the bridge of the Vanguard flagship, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. Red dots representing Iconian installations blinked across the holographic star map. "All right, team, we hit hard and fast. No mercy," Jacob ordered, his voice firm. "These bastards want to wipe us out? We'll show them what happens when you back humans into a corner." The Vanguard fleet tore through space, engines blazing as they approached their first target, an Iconian supply depot. Jacob's fingers flew across the controls, coordinating the attack. "All ships, fire on my mark," he commanded. 3, 2, 1, now! A barrage of missiles and energy beams lanced out, slamming into the depot's shields. The Iconian defenses crumbled under the assault. Secondary explosions rippled across the structure as vital systems overloaded. "Direct hit! Depot neutralized!" reported Jack Reeves, grinning fiercely. They didn't linger to celebrate. The fleet was already moving to the next target, a shipyard churning out Iconian fighters. Days blurred together as Jacob led strike after strike. Command centers reduced to rubble, supply lines severed, shipyards left as drifting wreckage. After a particularly grueling raid, Jacob studied the latest intelligence reports in his quarters. His eyes widened as he read the details of a secret Iconian facility. "Son of a bitch," he muttered, hitting his fist on the desk. Jacob called an emergency meeting with his top officers. "Listen up. We've got a serious problem. The Iconians are developing a bioweapon to target human DNA. If they deploy this thing, it's game over." Grim faces stared back at him. The implications were clear. The Iconians were willing to commit genocide to win. "So what's the plan, boss?" asked Mike Sniper Thompson, Jacob's old friend and wingman. Jacob laid out his strategy to infiltrate and destroy the research facility. It was high risk, but they had no choice. As their ships approached the asteroid field hiding the facility, Jacob's stomach tightened. Something felt off. Suddenly, alarms blared. Iconian fighters poured out from behind asteroids, weapons blazing. "Ambush! Evasive maneuvers!" Jacob shouted, yanking his controls hard. The space around them erupted into chaos. Jacob's fingers danced across his console, weaving through the asteroid field. A plasma bolt grazed his hull, alarms shrieking. "Sniper on your 6, Jacob warned. Mike barrel rolled, dodging enemy fire. "Thanks for the save." Jacob's targeting computer locked on. He squeezed the trigger, his shots finding their mark. An Iconian fighter exploded in a brilliant fireball. The dogfight raged on, a deadly dance among the asteroids. Jacob and Mike moved in perfect sync, covering each other as they tore through the Iconian squadron. Finally, the last enemy fighter went down. Jacob's ship limped towards the facility, smoke trailing from damaged systems. They'd survived, but at a cost. "Phantom, you're up," Jacob ordered as they approached the landing bay. "Work your magic." The hacker's fingers flew across her terminal, bypassing security protocols. The bay doors slowly ground open. Jacob's team spilled out of their ships, weapons at the ready. Alarms blared as they fought their way deeper into the facility. Iconian guards poured fire at them from entrenched positions. Jacob dove for cover, plasma bolts sizzling past. He popped up, squeezing off controlled bursts that dropped 2 guards. "Keep pushing!" he yelled over the din of battle. "Plant those charges as we go!" They fought room by room, leaving a trail of explosives in their wake. Jacob's muscles burned with exertion, but he pushed on. The fate of humanity hung in the balance. Finally, they reached the heart of the facility. The doors hissed open to reveal a laboratory filled with ominous-looking equipment, and there, waiting for them, stood Dr. Zorn. The Iconian scientist's eyes glittered with malice. "I wondered when you'd arrive, human, but you're too late." Jacob's blood ran cold as Zorn gestured to a sealed container. "The weapon is complete. Surrender now or I release it. Your choice." Time seemed to stand still as Jacob weighed his options. Then he caught Phantom's eye and gave a subtle nod. "Now," Jacob roared. Phantom's fingers flew across her wrist computer. Lights flickered as her virus tore through the facility's systems. Warning klaxons blared. "Power core overload imminent," an automated voice announced. Dr. Zorn lunged for a control panel. Jacob tackled him, the two grappling furiously. "Go!" Jacob shouted to his team. "Get to the ships!" They sprinted back the way they'd come, the facility shaking around them. Jacob's lungs burned as he ran, Dr. Zorn's enraged screams fading behind them. They piled into their ships just as the first explosions rocked the asteroid. Jacob gunned the engines, shooting out of the bay as the facility began to tear itself apart. A massive fireball consumed the asteroids behind them as they fled. Jacob let out a ragged breath. The bioweapon was destroyed. As news of their victory spread, Jacob knew the war had reached a turning point. But the hardest battles still lay ahead. He set his jaw, ready to face whatever came next. The fight for Earth's survival was just the beginning. Jacob Murray sat hunched over the tactical display, studying the holographic readout of the Iconian Citadel. His eyes narrowed as he took in the imposing structure, a massive battle station jam-packed with weapon emplacements and protected by overlapping energy shields. "That's where Jackson's holed up," Jacob said, pointing to the central command hub. "Intel confirms he's coordinating the invasion from there." Mike Sniper Thompson leaned in for a closer look. "Looks like one hell of a fortress. How are we getting in there?" Jacob tapped a few keys, bringing up schematics of a sleek Iconian stealth ship. "With this beauty. We swiped it during that raid on their research outpost last month. Phantom's been working overtime to crack its systems." The hacker in question glanced up from her workstation, dark circles under her eyes. "And it wasn't easy. Their tech is frustratingly elegant. but I think I've got it figured out well enough to get us past their sensors. Jacob nodded. Good work. We'll use it to slip right up to their front door. Then we go in hard and fast. He laid out the plan to his assembled team. They'd board the Citadel covertly, fight their way to the central computer core, plant explosives to cripple the manufacturing capabilities, and get the hell out. With luck, they might even take out Jackson in the process. Hours later, Jacob gripped the controls of the stolen Iconian ship as they approached the looming bulk of the Citadel. Sweat beaded on his forehead as they passed through the outer sensor grid. So far, so good, Phantom murmured from her station. Their systems aren't registering us. They docked at a maintenance airlock, and Jacob's team poured out into the Citadel's corridors. The first Iconian patrol rounded the corner, and Jacob opened fire without hesitation. Blue plasma bolts cut down the alien soldiers before they could raise the alarm. Move, Jacob hissed. They sprinted deeper into the station, encountering increasingly stiff resistance. Plasma fire filled the air as they fought their way forward inch by bloody inch. In the computer core, Phantom's fingers flew across the alien interface. I'm in, she said. Downloading everything I can get my hands on. Wait. Jacob, you need to see this. He peered at the screen, eyes widening as he took in schematics for massive orbital cannons and next-gen warships. They're churning this stuff out by the hundreds. If we don't shut this place down... Then let's get to work, Mike said grimly. They fanned out, planting explosive charges at key structural points and power junctions. Jacob set the final detonator, then froze as slow applause echoed through the chamber. Impressive, came a cold voice, but ultimately futile. Jacob spun to see Jackson himself step from the shadows, flanked by a squad of elite guards. The Iconian commander's eyes glittered with malice. Did you really think you could penetrate the heart of our empire so easily? Jackson sneered. Worked well enough to plant enough boom to turn this place into space dust, Jacob shot back. Jackson's face twisted with rage. Kill them all! The room erupted into chaos. Jacob dove for cover as plasma bolts seared the air around him. He popped up, squeezing off controlled bursts that dropped 2 Iconians. To his left, Mike was a whirlwind of destruction, his sniper rifle barking again and again. But there were too many. Jacob saw Phantom go down, clutching a smoking wound in her side. He gritted his teeth and charged forward, tackling Jackson in a fury of fists and elbows. The two leaders grappled fiercely, trading vicious blows. Jacob felt his nose crack under Jackson's fist, tasted blood in his mouth, but he gave as good as he got, driving his knee into the Iconian's midsection. Jackson staggered back, then lunged with inhuman speed. His hands closed around Jacob's throat, squeezing with terrifying strength. Black spots danced at the edges of Jacob's vision as he clawed desperately at Jackson's grip. Then a single shot rang out. Jackson's eyes went wide and he toppled sideways with a smoking hole in his shoulder. Mike lowered his rifle, a grim smile on his face. Thanks for the save, Jacob wheezed. Anytime, boss. Now let's get the hell out of here. They scooped up Phantom and ran, alarms blaring in their wake. They piled into their stolen ship just as the first explosions began to rock the Citadel. Jacob gunned the engines, shooting away from the doomed station. Behind them, a massive fireball consumed the Iconian stronghold. The shockwave buffeted their small craft, but Jacob held her steady as they rocketed to safety. In the days that followed, news of the Citadel's destruction spread like wildfire. Iconian forces, their supply lines severed and leadership in chaos, began to falter. But Jackson, enraged by his defeat, lashed out with increasing desperation. Jacob stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Iconian bombardment ships rain death on the cities below. His hands clenched into fists as he saw the destruction unfolding. All ships engage the enemy, he ordered. We end this now. The newly upgraded Vanguard fleet tore into the Iconian formations. Jacob's ship shuddered under plasma impacts, but he held steady, barking orders as they fought their way through to the Iconian command vessels. For hours, the battle raged across Earth orbit. Ships exploded into debris fields, escape pods streaking away from the carnage, but slowly, inexorably, the tide began to turn. Jacob allowed himself a fierce grin as he watched the last Iconian dreadnought crack apart under sustained fire. They'd done it. They'd driven the bastards back. But as the adrenaline faded, Jacob knew this was not nearly finished. The Iconians would be back, and Earth had paid a terrible price for this victory. He set his jaw, already planning their next move. The final confrontation still lay ahead, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. Jacob's eyes narrowed as he scanned the intercepted Iconian transmission. The encrypted message flickered on the holodisplay, its contents sending a chill down his spine. "Phantom, you seeing this?" he called out. The hacker looked up from her workstation, dark circles under her eyes. "Yeah, boss, it's not good." Jacob pounded his fist on the console. "Jackson, you sneaky bastard!" He quickly called an emergency meeting. Minutes later, his top advisors filed into the war room. Mike Sniper Thompson took his usual spot, leaning against the wall with arms crossed. "What's the situation, Jacob?" Mike asked. Jacob activated the holodisplay, showing a map of Earth. Red markers indicated Iconian-controlled territories. "Jackson's pulling back his forces from these key locations," he explained, gesturing to several areas. "It looks like we're being handed an opportunity to reclaim lost ground." Phantom spoke up. "But it's a trap. I've analyzed the transmission. Jackson's got a massive force hidden here." She highlighted a region on the outskirts of a ruined metropolis. Jacob nodded. "He wants us to commit our forces to retaking these areas, then spring the ambush when we're vulnerable." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "So what's the play?" Mike asked, breaking the tension. Jacob's eyes gleamed with willpower. "We turn his trap against him." He laid out his plan, detailing the assembly of an elite strike force and a diversionary attack to draw Jackson's attention. "While they're distracted, we go in quiet," Jacob explained. "Hit their hidden weapon emplacements and command centers before they know what's happening." As the diversionary attack commenced, Jacob led his covert team into the fortified region. They moved swiftly through the ruins, using stealth tech to avoid detection. Phantom's voice crackled over the comm. "Security node ahead. Give me a sec." Her fingers flew over her portable terminal, bypassing the Iconian defenses. The team pushed forward, encountering pockets of resistance. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as they engaged Iconian guards. Jacob ducked behind a crumbling wall, returning fire. "Push through! We can't let them raise the alarm!" They fought their way deeper into enemy territory, disabling key targets as they went. Explosions rocked the ground as they took out weapon emplacements. Suddenly alarms blared. Jackson's voice boomed over loudspeakers. "Kill them all!" The trap was sprung, but not as Jackson had planned. Jacob's team had already neutralized many of the ambush points. The approaching resistance forces found themselves facing a disorganized enemy. A massive firefight erupted. Jacob coordinated with the main resistance force, turning Jackson's trap into a deadly crossfire. "We've got them pinned down," Mike's voice came over the comm. "But Jackson's making a break for it." Jacob sprinted to his Vanguard fighter, firing up the engines. He took off in pursuit of Jackson's transport, weaving through the war-torn cityscape. Plasma bolts streaked between the two ships as they engaged in a high-speed aerial duel. Jacob's fighter shuddered under the impact of a near miss. "Come on, you alien bastard," Jacob muttered, lining up a shot. Just as Jackson's ship began to break through the resistance lines, a streak of light lanced out from a nearby rooftop. Mike's voice crackled over the comm. "Payday!" The shot struck Jackson's engines. The transport lurched, trailing smoke and fire as it plummeted towards the ground. Jacob watched as the ship crashed in a ball of flame. He landed nearby, racing towards the wreckage with his team. But as they secured the crash site, scanning the twisted metal and burning debris, one thing became clear. Jackson was gone. Jacob's fists clenched as he surveyed the battlefield. They'd won the day, but at a cost. And somewhere out there, Jackson was planning his next move. The war was far from finished. The acrid smell of ozone and scorched metal hung in the air as Jacob surveyed the aftermath of their victory. Smoke billowed from the ruined buildings of the once proud human city, now a patchwork of destruction and hastily erected fortifications. He wiped sweat from his brow, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of Iconian stragglers. "Sector 7 is clear, boss," Mike's voice crackled over the comm. "No sign of hostile activity." Jacob nodded, though his teammate couldn't see it. "Good work. Keep your eyes peeled. Jackson's too smart to leave anything valuable behind." As the resistance forces combed through the wreckage, salvaging what they could and fortifying key positions, Jacob's mind raced. He knew this victory was temporary. Somewhere out there, Jackson was licking his wounds and planning his next move. Hours later, Jacob stood in the war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the latest intelligence reports. His eyes narrowed as he studied the image of a barren, rocky world shrouded in swirling storms. "That's where the bastard's hiding," he muttered. Phantom looked up from her workstation, dark circles under her eyes, testament to endless hours of decryption work. "It's a fortress, Jacob. The kind of place you'd expect to find at the ass end of the galaxy. Jackson's got what's left of his fleet dug in tight." Jacob's face hardened. "Then we dig them out." He laid out his plan to the assembled commanders. Strike hard and fast before Jackson could regroup. Use every advantage they'd gained, every piece of Iconian tech they'd reverse-engineered. "It's risky," Mike said, arms folded across his chest. "We'll be operating deep in enemy territory, cut off from support." Jacob met his friend's gaze. "It's our best shot at ending this war. You with me?" Mike's lip quirked in a half-smile. "Always, boss." Days later, Jacob stood on the bridge of the Vanguard flagship, watching stars streak by as they pushed deeper into Iconian space. The ship shuddered as they passed through another cosmic anomaly, the shield straining against gravitational forces that threatened to tear them apart. "Phantom status report," Jacob called out. "Shield's holding at 62%, she responded, fingers dancing across her console. "We've lost contact with Bravo Squadron. Interference is getting worse." Jacob gritted his teeth. They'd known this would be a gauntlet, but the losses were already mounting. He opened his mouth to reply when alarms blared across the bridge. "Multiple contacts," the sensor officer shouted. "Iconian patrol fleet bearing 047. "All ships, battle stations," Jacob barked. "Phantom, get me a targeting solution. Mike, take your squadron and flank them from above." Space lit up with weapons fire as the two fleets clashed. Jacob's ship rocked under the impact of Iconian energy weapons, but he held steady, barking orders as they fought their way through. Mike's voice came over the comm, tight with concentration. "We've got their flagship lined up, Jacob. Permission to engage." "Light 'em up," Jacob replied. A carefully placed volley of missiles streaked across space, detonating against the Iconian ship's shields. As they flickered and failed, the Vanguard fleet pounced, tearing into the suddenly vulnerable vessel. The battle raged for hours, a deadly dance of maneuvering and precision strikes. But slowly, inevitably, the Vanguard fleet gained the upper hand. Jacob allowed himself a grim smile as the last Iconian ship went dark, drifting lifelessly in the void. "All ships, status report," he called out. As damage assessments rolled in, Jacob's expression hardened. They'd won, but at a cost. Several ships were too damaged to continue, their crews evacuating to other vessels. "We push on," Jacob said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Jackson ends this here." The Vanguard fleet limped onward, battered but unbroken. Days later, they emerged from the last jump point to find Jackson's stronghold looming before them. A massive planetary fortress, dripping with weapon emplacements and surrounded by a swarm of Iconian warships. "All ships, prepare for battle," Jacob ordered, his voice steady despite the odds arrayed against them. "This is it. Let's finish this." As the fleets clashed in orbit, Jacob led his infiltration team to the planet's surface. They moved swiftly through the alien landscape, ducking from cover to cover as Iconian patrols swept the area. Phantom worked her magic on the security systems, opening paths deeper into the fortress. They fought their way through twisting corridors, plasma bolts sizzling past their heads as they pushed forward. In the heart of the command center, Jacob's team worked quickly to disable the planetary defenses. Alarms blared as the Iconians realized the extent of the infiltration. "Jacob, we've got incoming!" Mike's voice crackled over the comm. "Looks like Jackson's making a run for it." Jacob sprinted for the nearest hangar, commandeering an Iconian fighter. He rocketed into the war-torn skies, zeroing in on Jackson's fleeing shuttle. The two ships danced through a maelstrom of weapons fire and debris, neither pilot willing to give an inch. Jacob's fighter shuddered under a direct hit, warning lights flashing across his console. With a snarl of effort, he lined up his shot. A stream of plasma fire lanced out, catching Jackson's engines. The Iconian shuttle lurched, trailing fire as it plummeted towards the ground. Jacob landed near the crash site, weapon at the ready as he approached the smoking wreckage. The shuttle's hatch blew open, and Jackson emerged, eyes blazing with hate. The two leaders clashed in a fury of fists and elbows. Jacob felt ribs crack under Jackson's inhuman strength, but he fought on, driven by the memory of Earth's devastation. In a high-stakes endeavor, Jacob feinted left, then drove his knee into Jackson's midsection. As the Iconian doubled over, Jacob brought his elbow down hard on the back of Jackson's neck. The alien commander crashed to the ground stunned. Before he could recover, Jacob had him in restraints. "It's over, Jackson," Jacob growled. "You've lost." As word of Jackson's capture spread, the remaining Iconian forces quickly surrendered. Jacob's team secured the fortress, uncovering caches of advanced weaponry and technology that would prove invaluable in the battles to come. Days later, Jacob stood before a cheering crowd on Earth, hailed as the hero who had turned the tide of the war. But even as he waved to the assembled masses, his mind was elsewhere. In a secure facility deep beneath the ground, Jackson sat in a cell, awaiting interrogation. Jacob knew that the real work was just beginning. The Iconian Empire was vast, and Jackson's capture was just the first step in unraveling its secrets. As the crowd's roar washed over him, Jacob's eyes narrowed with fierce focus. They had won a great victory, but the war was not nearly finished, and he would see it through to the bitter end. Jacob stood in the war room of the Vanguard flagship, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of the Gamma Centauri system. The blue glow of the projection illuminated the faces of his team, each etched with a mix of drive and apprehension. "This is it," Jacob said, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "The Iconian shipyards, our chance to hit them where it hurts." Phantom leaned forward, her fingers dancing across a datapad. "I've analyzed the intel from Jackson's interrogation. The shipyards are heavily defended, but there's a weakness in their sensor grid here." She highlighted a section of the hologram. Mike nodded, his eyes narrowing as he studied the tactical display. "We can use that blind spot to get our infiltration team on the ground." Jacob turned to face his assembled strike force. "This won't be easy. We're going deep into enemy territory, and we'll be outnumbered and outgunned. But if we can take out these shipyards, we deny the Iconians their ability to rebuild their fleet." The journey to Gamma Centauri pushed the Vanguard fleet to its limits. They navigated through treacherous regions of space, dodging Iconian patrols and weathering fierce cosmic storms that threatened to tear their ships apart. As they approached the outer edges of the system, alarms blared across the bridge. "Iconian warships, dead ahead," the sensor officer shouted. Jacob's hands tightened on the command console. "All ships, battle formations, engage at will." Space lit up with weapons fire as the two fleets clashed. Plasma bolts and energy beams crisscrossed the void, striking shields and ripping through hull plating. On the bridge of his flagship, Jacob barked orders, coordinating the Vanguard fleet's movements. Cruiser group push forward, fighter squadrons strafe their flanks. The battle raged for hours, a deadly dance of strategy and firepower. Jacob's upgraded ships held their own against the superior Iconian technology, but the enemy's numbers were taking their toll. "We can't keep this up forever," Mike's voice crackled over the comm. "We need to make our move on those shipyards." Jacob nodded grimly. Agreed. Phantom, you're up. Get us that opening. While the space battle raged, Jacob led his infiltration team to the surface of the largest shipyard. They moved swiftly through the alien facility, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous production halls. Phantom worked her magic on the security systems, her fingers flying over her hollow interface. I'm in their network. Disabling security protocols. Now. Alarms blared as the team pushed deeper into the facility. They fought their way through squads of Iconian guards, plasma bolts sizzling past their heads. Plant those charges, Jacob shouted, ducking behind a massive piece of machinery. We need to cripple their production capabilities. As the infiltration team sowed chaos within the shipyards, Mike led his fighter squadron on a daring assault against the Iconian capital ships. His voice was tight with concentration as he called out targets. Fox 2! Fox 2! Direct hit on their command ship! The tide of battle began to turn as the combined assault from space and ground took its toll on the Iconian defenses. But victory was far from assured. In the heart of the shipyard, Jacob and his team confronted their final obstacle, the massive railgun that threatened to obliterate the Vanguard fleet. Phantom, can you shut it down? Jacob asked, his voice urgent as the weapon's charging sequence initiated. Phantom's fingers flew across her interface, her face a mask of intense focus. Their firewalls are too strong. I can't disable it, but I might be able to redirect it. Time seemed to slow as Phantom worked her digital magic. The railgun's barrel shifted, aligning with the shipyard's main power generators. Fire in the hole, Jacob shouted. The railgun discharged with a thunderous boom. Its devastating payload tore through the power generators, setting off a chain reaction that ripped through the heart of the shipyard. As explosions rocked the facility, Jacob and his team sprinted for their extraction point. They fought their way through collapsing corridors and waves of panicked Iconian personnel. With the shipyards in ruins and their defensive fleet in disarray, the remaining Iconian forces had no choice but to surrender. Jacob watched from the bridge of his flagship as the last enemy ships powered down their weapons. In the aftermath of the battle, Jacob led teams to scour the wreckage of the shipyards. They uncovered caches of advanced technology and databanks filled with valuable intelligence. As Jacob studied a recovered Iconian terminal, his eyes widened. Phantom, take a look at this. It's data on their research facilities. Phantom leaned in, her eyes scanning the alien text. This is big, Jacob. They're working on some seriously advanced weapons tech. Jacob's face hardened with tenacity. Then that's our next target. We hit them there, and we might just have a shot at ending this war for good. Jacob's eyes narrowed as he studied the holographic display of the Carina Nebula. The swirling clouds of gas and dust concealed their target, an Iconian research station, developing a weapon that could turn the tide of the war. This won't be easy, he said, addressing his assembled team. The nebula's going to play hell with our systems. Phantom nodded, her fingers dancing across her datapad. I've been working on some modifications to our nav computers. It should help, but we'll still be flying partially blind. It'll have to do, Jacob replied. He turned to Mike. Sniper, I want you on point for the infiltration. We'll need your eyes and your aim once we're inside. Mike checked his rifle, a ghost of a smile on his face. Just get me there, boss. I'll handle the rest. The Vanguard fleet pushed into the nebula, their hulls creaking under the strain of the turbulent gases. Phantom's voice crackled over the comms, guiding them through the treacherous stellar landscape. Unidentified contacts, the sensor officer shouted. Bearing 047, closing fast. Jacob's hands tightened on the command console. All ships, battle stations. Looks like the Iconians were expecting us. Space lit up with weapons fire as the two fleets clashed. Plasma bolts and energy beams lanced through the nebula's multicolored clouds, creating an eerie light show. Phantom, we need that opening, Jacob barked, his ship rocking under enemy fire. Working on it, she replied, her voice tight with concentration. Their firewalls are tough, but I've got it. I'm in their network. Jacob felt the deck shudder beneath his feet as his strike team's infiltration craft launched. They streaked towards the research station, weaving through the chaotic space battle. The strike craft slammed into the station's docking bay, its occupants spilling out with weapons at the ready. Jacob led the charge, his plasma rifle spitting death at the surprised Iconian guards. "Move!" he shouted, gesturing down a corridor. "We need to find those labs!" They fought their way through the station's twisting halls, the air thick with the acrid smell of weapons fire and burning circuitry. Phantom worked furiously on her portable terminal, bypassing security systems and sealing blast doors behind them. "Jacob, you need to see this," Mike called out, his voice grim. They entered a vast chamber filled with twisted wreckage and scorch marks. In the center stood a pillar of crackling energy, so bright it hurt to look at directly. "Is that—" Jacob began. Phantom nodded, her face pale. "It's their new weapon. The destructive potential is— I've never seen anything like it." A high-pitched whine filled the air, and Jacob spun to see a squad of Iconian soldiers pouring into the room. At their head stood a tall, gaunt figure with wild eyes. "Vortak!" Jacob growled, recognizing the lead Iconian researcher from intelligence briefings. "You're too late, humans!" Vortak screamed, his voice filled with manic glee. "The weapon is nearly complete. Soon, your entire species will be nothing but ash." Jacob dove for cover as Vortak activated a control panel, the chamber filled with a searing light as experimental plasma weapons came online. "Phantom!" Jacob shouted over the din of battle. "Can you shut it down?" She shook her head, fingers flying across her terminal. "Not from here. We need to get to the main reactor." They fought their way through the station, Vortak always one step ahead, taunting them with glimpses of his new weapon's power. Entire sections of the facility vanished in blinding flashes of plasma energy. Finally, they reached the heart of the station. The massive plasma reactor pulsed with barely contained power, casting everything in an otherworldly blue glow. Vortak stood before them, a cruel smile on his alien features. "You've lost, humans. The weapon is ready. Your fleets will burn. Your worlds will be scorched clean of life." Jacob charged forward, ducking under Vortak's wild swing. The two grappled, trading vicious blows as they struggled for supremacy. Jacob felt ribs crack under the Iconian's inhuman strength, but he fought on. Vortak slammed Jacob against the reactor's containment field, the energy crackling inches from his face. "I will enjoy watching you die," the Iconian hissed. "Not today," Jacob snarled, headbutting Vortak with all his might. As the Iconian staggered back, Phantom's voice rang out. "Jacob, move! I've overloaded the reactor!" Jacob rolled away as the containment field collapsed. A torrent of superheated plasma engulfed Vortak. His screams cut short as he was vaporized in an instant. "We need to go now!" Jacob shouted, urging his team towards the exit. They ran through collapsing corridors, the station shaking itself apart around them. They reached their infiltration craft with seconds to spare, blasting free of the doomed facility. The research station vanished in a blinding explosion, taking with it any trace of the Iconian's terrifying new weapon. Jacob watched from the cockpit of their escape craft, his expression grim. "All ships report," he called out as they rejoined the battered Vanguard fleet. The responses came in slowly, each one a litany of damage and casualties. They had won, but the cost had been high. Jacob stood on the bridge of his flagship, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The losses from their victory in the Carina Nebula greatly troubled on him, but he pushed those thoughts aside. They had a job to finish. "All ships report in," he ordered, his voice steady despite the tension coiling in his gut. One by one, the captains of the Vanguard fleet responded. Their voices carried a mix of exhaustion and perseverance. Jacob nodded to himself. They were ready. "We've located the Iconian Imperial Command," he announced, bringing up a holographic image of a massive space station. "This is our target. Take it out, and we cut off the head of the snake." Mike whistled low. "That's one big bastard. How are we getting in there?" Jacob turned to Phantom, who was hunched over her console. "What have you got for us?" Phantom's fingers flew across her interface. I've analyzed the data we pulled from the research station. There's a weakness in their sensor grid here. She highlighted a section of the hologram. If we time it right, we can slip a small team through. Jacob nodded. Good work. Mike, you and Phantom will lead the infiltration team. Your job is to disable their defenses and clear the way for our main assault. Mike checked his rifle, a grim smile on his face. Consider it done, boss. The journey to the heart of Iconian space was fraught with danger. They navigated through treacherous asteroid fields and narrowly avoided detection by Iconian patrols. More than once, they were forced to engage enemy ships in quick, brutal skirmishes. As they approached their target, alarms blared across the bridge. Massive energy signature detected, the sensor officer shouted. It's an Iconian fleet. Jacob's hands tightened on the command console. All ships, battle formations. This is it, people. Everything we fought for comes down to this moment. Engage at will. Space erupted in a furious light show as the two fleets clashed. Plasma bolts and energy beams crisscrossed the void, striking shields and tearing through hull plating. Explosions bloomed in silence, punctuated by the urgent chatter of ship-to-ship communications. Jacob coordinated the Vanguard fleet's movements, calling out targets and issuing orders. Cruiser group, push forward. Fighter squadrons, strafe their flanks. In the midst of the chaos, a small, stealthy craft broke away from the main fleet. Jacob watched it go, knowing that the success of their mission rested on Mike and Phantom's shoulders. The infiltration team's ship weaved through the debris field, dodging stray weapons fire and the burning hulks of destroyed vessels. They approached the massive Iconian station, using the battle as cover for their approach. We're in, Mike's voice crackled over the comm. Proceeding to breach point. Jacob nodded, his attention split between the space battle and the progress of the infiltration team. Good hunting. We'll keep them busy out here. The battle raged on, a deadly dance of strategy and firepower. Jacob's upgraded ships held their own against the superior Iconian technology, but the enemy's numbers were taking their toll. Hull breach on deck 4, an officer shouted. Sealing bulkheads. Jacob gripped his console as the ship shuddered under another impact. Reroute power to forward shields. We need to punch through their line. As the space battle reached its crescendo, Jacob received the transmission he'd been waiting for. Mike's voice tight with exertion. We're inside, moving to disable their defenses. Jacob allowed himself a small smile. Copy that. All ships, prepare for phase 2. The moment those defenses go down, we hit them with everything we've got. The infiltration team fought their way through the station's corridors, disabling security systems and planting explosives at key junctions. Jacob could only imagine the chaos they were causing inside. Suddenly, the tactical display shifted. The station's defensive grid flickered and died. Now! Jacob shouted. All ships concentrate fire on these coordinates. The Vanguard fleet unleashed a devastating barrage, their weapons finding weak points in the station's suddenly vulnerable hull. As sections of the massive structure began to break apart, Jacob knew the real battle was just beginning. Ground assault teams prepare for deployment, he ordered. We're going in.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.